Welcome to Radical Personal Finance, a show dedicated to providing you with the knowledge, skills, insight, and encouragement you need to live a rich and meaningful life now and to build an enduring family legacy over the next few centuries. My name is Joshua Sheets. I am your host. And today on the podcast, I am thrilled to welcome back my good friend Gregory Treat for a special discussion of family legacy planning. Greg, welcome back to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Joshua.
So I've been looking forward to speaking to you again. We've had, I think, 3 interviews on the podcast so far. I've intended it to be more, but I got buried over the last few months and I'm just now digging out. And so we've got a lot to talk about. But one of the things that has brought us together as friends is simply a shared interest in basically the topic of legacy. And as I look around, look at our culture, look at where we are, look at my family, look at my children, look at my forebears, etc. I think that this is one of the most fruitful things that we can be building at this point in time that has the potential to solve quite a lot of the issues surrounding us. And over the last couple of years, we're starting to build a cohort of men who are working together and able to meaningfully impact families on this topic. I'd like you've shared a bit of your interest in legacy planning, but this has basically become your sole focus. Is that accurate?
Yeah, we talked about on my first appearance on your podcast, kind of my story, my family history, the way that we lost our land, and then kind of how that affected me and set me on the trajectory that I'm on today. About 4 or 5 years ago, I came to the realization that there was a real need for a legacy planning experience and a thought process that was not just legal. At the time I was working for a boutique estate planning law firm, and we had old money clients and we had new money clients, and the new money clients were getting the exact same legal documents, the same trusts, the same family limited partnerships, the same everything as the old money clients, and they were not using them in the same way, and they were not getting the same outcomes, right? One of the difficulties of the space that we're in, whether it's law or finance or any kind of planning, is everyone makes the same promises. Everyone makes the legacy promises. That's what the clients want to hear, and so everyone just says, "Oh, this will protect your family. This will protect your legacy. This will give an inheritance to the people that you love and care about. It'll protect your communities." All of these things, right? This is the sales pattern that you hear in our industry, and the results are just not good. The outcomes are just not good, and that I think leads to a lot of heartache. It leads to a lot of disappointment in the client base, and it leads to a lot of frustration with the professionals. And so, about 4 years ago, I went out on my own and decided I was going to try and solve this problem. I was going to help. And the piece that I initially identified was a family culture problem. It was hey, you need to learn how to use these documents, how to think about your family in a different way. And I still believe that is, a vital and necessary part of it. One of the real joys of getting to know you in the community that you've brought me into, it's wild to me that I think we've only known each other for a little bit more than, or a little bit less actually, than a year and a half was the first time that we spoke. And you have brought me into a community where there are not just clients who care about these things. Everyone's clients care about these things. It's kind of a universal human condition, but where there are a number of people that are deeply devoted to actually getting the outcomes. Who, if I say, there's a lot of context, a lot of financial planning context, where if I point at somebody's process and say, "Hey, that's actually going to hurt the client's ability to get this legacy piece that you mentioned in your marketing," well, that would just be me causing waves and causing problems and being difficult and all of that. And I should just kind of sit down and do the work to the normal standard that we do things in America, and just not make waves. And one of the real pleasures of the RPF community is that there's a lot of people that care about it, that are saying, "Oh, okay, if that's going to impact the legacy stuff, we're going to make changes. We are going to actually care about getting the outcomes for our clients that we need to get." And that's all too often a very rare thing. So,
Yeah, I had a really. It is a rare thing, but in a community of people pulling it together, it seems that it's an important thing at this point in time. And I was just last week, I had a meeting with the pastor at the church that we're a part of. And I was trying to, he's an older pastor, very, very good, very learned, etc. But he's a boomer. And so I was trying to, we were discussing various issues, various conflicts and whatnot. And I found myself just right at the heart of basically the boomer issue. And after the discussion, I sent him a link to, I was listening to Malcolm and Simone Collins' Based Camp podcast. And Malcolm and Simone were interviewing, I forget the guy's name, some Logic something or other channel. And what was fascinating about them is both Malcolm and the interviewee, again, I'm sorry, I don't call his name. Both of them were atheists a few years ago. And right. Both of them have converted to some version of Christianity over the past years. And so here are these young men, neither of whom has ever been in the traditional church environment that I am very familiar with, that I grew up and was raised in. And Malcolm asked him a question about, like, what is the biggest problem right now in the world? What is the biggest challenge and how can we fix it? And the answer that they both immediately agreed upon on that discussion was a lack of mentorship, lack of guidance, lack of intergenerational transfer. And as they discussed it, I just found myself nodding along. And I thought, this is at its core of what is so fundamentally broken at the moment, is the lack of generational continuity. And I find that this theme and the specific application of it comes up in my life on several times per week. Basically trying to fight with people to say, the experience of this generation, the experience of the last 60 years is not the normal experience in human history. The normal experience in human history is radically different. So don't just think that we're doing the right thing because what we're doing has been traditional for 60 years. We have to go back to the real history and then chart out a path to the future of having good intergenerational continuity.
Right. And 60 years wherein, we were the dominant hyperpower, 90% of all, global commodities had the value added of manufacturing happen inside the United States. We had the strongest currency in the world. We had the largest gold reserves in the world. We had, hyper dominance in a whole bunch of technological domains. And none of those conditions hold true today.
Exactly. So we wanted to do this podcast today to help promote an event that you are hosting with another mutual friend, Mikkel Thorup. Mikkel and his family came, and we all were together at Radical Family Camp a few months ago. And Mikkel gave a talk. I asked him to give a talk on his 100-year vision. And that's going to be the foundation of this new event that you and Mikkel are co-hosting. So I'd like you to just kind of lay out an event. This is not the first time you've done it, right? Tell us about the event, and we're going to walk through some of the themes here to help promote the event to many of my listeners who will want to come.
Yeah. So, I mean, the first thing is, to note that I met Mikkel at the first Radical Family Camp that I attended, and it was just an amazing experience. I think we basically we did presentations on one of the first mornings, kind of back-to-back presentations, and then we sat in the cafeteria and sort of tag teamed an expert session for like 6 hours. He went for 6 hours. I think I bailed after 4. I was like, guys, I drove in last night very late. I got to get some rest, and but Mikkel's endurance is exceptional. So that was our first meeting, and it has just been an incredibly rich, rewarding relationship. Mikkel is one of those people that I was saying earlier that Mikkel will figure out, hey, is this actually getting the outcomes that I've promised people? And if you say, well, here's the problems with doing this to get the outcomes that you said, he takes that so very seriously. So one of the things was last November, he as he's thinking about this stuff, as he was kind of spinning up his own family office, he did a small event for his clients, and invited me to come and speak at a couple sessions, and it was that same topic of 100-year thinking, 100-year planning, and it's just such an important frame, the 100-year plan, right? We think we're doing long-term planning in the U.S. when we have a 5-year plan, right? 5 years is kind of like the gold standard of corporate planning. Is, well, how most financial plans now are like quarterly. Well, how are we gonna maximize our profits in the next 30 to 90 days, right? And that's, when you do that, there's just a whole bunch of risks that fall outside of the frame that you're considering and thinking about, right? One of my foundational experiences was being in a boardroom and saying, I think that this plan is going to have a risk in year 6 or 7, and the response of the other people in that room was, well, we're going to sell this down the river in 3 to 5 years, so why do we care, right? And that just, it was one of those, should have been a wake up call to me that I was not long for that job experience, which I wasn't, but it didn't at the time. I didn't quite pick up on that's what's going to happen. Um, so that was the genesis of this, sitting down and thinking, okay, well, what does it look like to plan for 100 years, right? And so that's saying, well, we're going to need different types of legal structures, we're going to need different types of financial arrangements. There's a great book by Will and Bill Bonner, the Family Fortunes book, that talks about, I think he calls it like type B investing or beta investing, something like this, where it's hey, we're not chasing quick returns. I'm not sure I agree with that term, by the way, but that's the term that he used. We're not chasing quick returns. We are chasing long-term performance. And so that's kind of the focus of the conference is, let's think about, what do you need, not just to retire and have a good life for the rest of your life, but to meet your long-term goals as we move into a future. So you think about things like, when you're moving from owning a bunch of things in your own name, owning your business in your own name, to having that transferred into a trust. What does that mean? What is that like? What is the experience? How do you manage that, right? You're going to need, especially if you're a US citizen, you're going to need probably some kind of independent trustee. How do you manage your relationship with the trustee? What does that look like? How do you think about it? And then, from my perspective, the piece that I'm most passionate about is, how do you bring your kids into this environment, give them an honorable framework for it, so that they participate in your trust without becoming a trust fund baby, right? Which is actually not. I don't think it's that hard. There are a number of errors that Americans in particular are kind of culturally programmed to make. One of the things that I was having a conversation with a boomer just the other day about, hey, when you help someone with something, you need to allow them to understand what obligations you're putting on them. Okay, because if you don't say clearly, this is what I want from you, this is what I expect from you, this is what my hope and desire is, then many times these people will experience, oh, well, this person is going to come to me at a time I don't know, and make demands on me that are going to put me in a bad situation at, presumably at the worst time. And this is a really hard kind of thing in terms of the relationships between the boomers and the younger generation, is that it creates resentment to not tell people what is it that you want. And it also creates entitlement, right? So, because they get to the point where, I shouldn't have to do anything to keep getting this benefit, right? That's what the younger people feel like. And the older people actually do have something that they want, and want pretty bad. And so, figuring out, how do we understand that? How do we find these obligations for each other? And the answer is, of course, to believe in your family. To say, this is what our family's calling and mission is. This is what we're aiming for. This is where we're going. This is the virtuous thing that we do in the world. This is our calling, if you will, right? And have some understanding of, there's a deal that we have made, in Christian theology, right? Salvation is not transactional. Salvation is the free gift of God by grace alone, through faith alone. Certainly in Protestant Christianity, but blessing comes with conditions, right? The impact that you make in the world, the amount of money that you are entrusted with, the thing that you do that you pass on to your children, the inheritance. If God is helping you have an inheritance and carry that on, for sure there is going to be a obligation that's attached to that. And so, how do we recognize that? There's no way to get rid of that obligation. It exists. It should exist. And there's righteous obligations and unrighteous obligations. And how do we think about that? And how do we think about that? Maybe if your family is not very religious, or if your family is very religious, these are all things that you can consider. I think it's fun. Mikkel has just some wonderful stories that he tells about his family, about how he's got family values that he teaches to his kids in a whole variety of different contexts, and those family values drive decision making. Those core values are how he teaches his children how those values apply by explaining to them what he's going to do in business and why. Right? Now he's doing that from, I mean, basically a very young age with his children. They're going to have an incredible leg up in the world. But I believe that any family, any father who's got, 5, 10 years left in him, any mother that isn't, on death's door. If you're on death's door, then that's difficult. It's a very difficult place to find yourself. Presumably, if you're walking around, the sunny Caribbean with us, you're in good enough health that's not the situation you find yourself in. Um, but being able to say, how do we think about family? How do we think about obligation? How do we think about family values? And what is the plan for getting presenting these values to our children in a way that they find useful and beneficial, and that connect them back to their parents and to the story that their family is a part of. So
So you and I, right, we basically agree with one another. We talk all the time. We seem to see the world similarly, but obviously not everybody
yeah,
agrees with us, right? We both wind up
right.
pushing the boulder uphill in many cases. So what is the biggest objection that my listeners probably have running through their head to this thesis that you're describing and that we're discussing? What do you think is the biggest objection, the biggest complaint that people have about all this stuff that we're talking about?
I mean, I think that the objection, the way that it gets framed, is one about creating dependence in your children. They want their children to be independent. They want their children to be successful. They want their children to, they want their children, they would say, to be independent like them. And I think that's oftentimes a framing that doesn't take into account. I think in many ways, even those of us that are younger than the boomers are still caught in the trap of not really having a great understanding of what it's like on the ground, right? I mean, I've been married for coming up on we just had our 13th anniversary. Right. And when I talk to people that are unmarried or that are trying to get married right now, the world that they describe is foreign and horrible, right? Like, I just cannot imagine what it would be like to try to meet and woo my bride in that condition. When you talk to, I went to law school again, I graduated from law school 10 years ago. And when I talk to people that are in law school today or in undergrad today, the things that are coming out of their mouths are just astonishingly bad, right? And it was astonishingly bad when I was going to school, right? It was soul destroying. It was something that I just regarded as an awful, horrible experience. And so I think that there it's really a peacetime mindset is what I would say. There's this assumption that, well, there's not really any major challenges, so we have to create additional challenges. Um, Ironically, I think a lot of our people are repeating things that they've heard, and they don't necessarily know what the origin of those things are. So there's a famous phrase, well, the strong will make it through, right? We have to help the weak, and the strong will make it through, and they're the independent ones. Do you know where that comes from? Do you know
I don't
who
know.
said
No,
that?
no, no.
It was the Fabian socialists in Britain, and they said that in the hearing of a young Lee Kuan Yew. And he found that so grossly offensive and so soul destroying and so kind of anti-civilizational that he made it a point in his memoirs years later to just blast this, philosophy by name, and it's still like looked down upon heavily in Singapore because they view that as just a poisonous frame, a poisonous thought process that's going to hurt people and going to cause damage. And unfortunately, I think a lot of people repeat that without knowing where that mindset comes from, where that idea originates.
So your answer to the question is similar to one of my answers to the question. And the one I was thinking about, it lines up, but let me describe it. Because I think if we understand, if we can describe it, we might be able to figure out what the answer is. I was thinking about it in terms of independence and dependence. So you framed it as having children not be dependent on parents, right? Of course, we have our the stereotype of the trust fund kid that we all have seen, right? So there is a real thing.
Right.
The flip side of that, the flip side,
Well,
go ahead. Yeah.
let me interject. Like, how many of you have seen that? I have met and worked intimately with trust fund babies as part of my profession. I really want to ask how many other people have done that.
So
all right, like I don't know.
Yeah, that's a fair thing.
Have you seen it on TV?
Correct.
Did the TV tell you this was a bad thing?
Correct. I would say I have interacted with a handful, but I probably just am falling into stereotyping without actual measurable data on that. So it's an interesting correction. But we react against this idea, real or imagined, whatever it is, and we pretend that, well, everything is the flip side is, well, if we can just get our children to be independent, then everything will work. What I am actually observing with firsthand knowledge in family and in friends is how difficult it is for the vast majority of people to genuinely be independent, to genuinely figure out what they want to do. And as I have watched this, I did not expect it, because I think I'm one of those people who had a pretty easy time. Like, I just know what I want and I just chase it as hard as I can, and then some new things appear. And so I always judged that everyone else was going to be just like me. But I have been sobered to see that that's not the case. And so as I watch people, I'm looking at young people trying to figure out what they want. And I've become pretty frustrated with how we're doing that to them. What I mean is, we impose upon them generally a course of study during their high school years to some degree of extremity or not. We don't spend much time with them in their high school years trying to help them figure out what they might want to do, what their skills and their inclinations might be. We just impose upon them this particular course of study. And then along the way, at some point in time, usually 18, the magical age, we say, okay, now what do you want to do with the rest of your life? But that comes with huge costs embedded in it. And as I've been coaching some of my family members recently, they've done a couple of my family members have done everything that you should do, and yet they're facing mountainous bills to go to college. They don't know what they want. There's not a pathway there for them. And so,
and the reports are that many of these degrees are useless or worse than useless.
Right.
Like, there's enormous evidence that this system is not working at all.
Right. It's not working. And so I've come to see it actually more not in the boomer mentality of, to impose expectations on my child would harm my child, so therefore I need to give my child total independence and total freedom. I've come to see it more as allowing my child to know, here is the expected pathway that I have built for you, is actually a gift, right? I find myself as an entrepreneur daydreaming many occasions about how great it would be to not be an entrepreneur, just to go and be an employee working for somebody. How amazing would it be to have a boss who just told me what to do, and all I needed to do was do what that boss said, and life would be great. And so with children, I think that the default should actually be to say, here is the path that I have prepared for you. And I, as a virtuous, intelligent, thoughtful person, I have made preparations for you. You are my son. You are my daughter. And by definition, you're probably going to be a lot like me. And since you're probably going to be a lot like me, our business, which I'm flourishing in and which I have flourished in, or our area of focus, our area of work, is probably going to be a good fit for you. So I've made preparations for you to go down this pathway. And then we're going to be discussing constantly along the way, is this default option a good fit for you, or do we need to modify it and adjust it in some way? And that is what, I think would dramatically help a lot of people if we just did that. And there's lots of reasons we don't do this, but I sent you that link to, you remember the physician family that I sent you, where mom and dad were both doctors and they had 4 doctors, all of their children? Like, it's the most obvious thing in the world that if you're a doctor family, this is the preparation. And yet the same thing applies to me and the same thing applies to you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a friend of mine that he's, he's a dentist, and his sons so far, I think his daughter's gonna become a lawyer. His sons so far, or she may already be a lawyer now at this point. That's been a couple years. His sons so far have all become dentists, and there's just a bunch of like practical advantages to it, right? Because one of the things that happens occasionally is if they go down, they get sick or whatever, dad can fill in for them, right? In their job, right? And they have ways of making that work from a billing perspective. They have a family holding company, all this stuff, right? But they are able, because they're entrepreneurs and because they're all entrepreneurs in the same area, to reinforce one another. And so even at very early stages of the business, like they've never had the situation. Many entrepreneurs get to the point where, well, I just don't get a vacation for the first 10 years, right? And God knows only what that does to your marriage and does to the rest of your life, right? So it does to the raising of your children. But they're able to make that work because they can support one another, because they have all of the tools and all of the expertise, and they can just fill in and it's all good, right? And I've experienced the same thing, not personally, but there are lawyer families that I know that have that dynamic, and where you can make it work, it's a great dynamic. It's a gorgeous, beautiful thing, and it really creates real economic advantages. Again, just to kind of, I think a lot of people are just underestimating the challenges that people are. I think a lot of people feel like if we help our children, if we set that path out, well, that's life on easy mode. That's life that will be so, it's like cheats on a video game, and it won't be fun and it won't be meaningful and they won't be able to actually build anything. And I think that that's just unrealistic. Like, people don't appreciate where we are in our culture. There's a great movie that I talk about, Gran Torino with Clint Eastwood, right? And there's this scene where he gets there's a young Asian kid who he's trying to get him a job because there's gangs in the neighborhood. They're recruiting this kid, and he just doesn't understand why this kid is not getting a job. Right, so he goes out and they buy him a tool belt and a hammer, and Clint Eastwood calls his old construction buddy, says, "Hey, I've got this kid. I want you to give him a job." The Clint Eastwood spends like 5 minutes explaining to this kid, "Hey, don't don't sleep. Don't oversleep. Don't be lazy. Get up on time and make sure you're there on time." Because in Clint Eastwood's mind, the only thing that could prevent this kid from being successful in the job that he'd arranged for him was he was lazy and didn't get up on time. Right? And if you've watched the movie, you know that what actually happens is the local gang, seeing one of the people that they consider their people, they feel like they have a claim on this kid. They jump him, they beat the snot out of him, they take his tools, and he, arrives, 2 hours late to the job. And the guy calls Clint Eastwood and says, "Hey, this isn't going to work. Like, something's weird here. Something's weird here, and I can't. I don't want to deal with this." Right? And that's what clues in, to his credit in the movie. He sort of clues in, oh, there's something much greater here than a kid being lazy, a kid being, not getting up on time, right? There are structural barriers. There is actual malicious people who are actively trying to prevent my child or this kid from accomplishing the good and reasonable thing. I would submit to you that if you went out and tried, you and your child's resources might be insufficient, right? It will be a contest for your family as a whole, right? And that's the right way to understand where we are as our country. Your son is not an individual competing with other. I mean, he might be an individual, but he is not competing with other individuals. He is competing with families and with clans and with political groupings and a whole bunch of kind of quasi-tribal and quasi-tribal groupings in our culture today. And if you send him out there alone, he will get eaten. Not because he's a bad kid, but unless he is a generational genius on the level of an Elon Musk, he is not going to be able to overcome a challenge that is a 20-man challenge. The Chinese have this great saying, two hands cannot fend off four fists, something to that effect, right? And there is just a reality to scale, and we need to take seriously the fact that, hey, all of our systems are choked with, many of them politically arranged, kind of DEI woke, but even the ones that are not, the people that are competing there are competing as groups. And so if you send your son or your daughter out there alone, you're not going to get good outcomes from that. And we need to take that seriously. This is the world in which we live, and it's only going to become more so. That pattern is just accelerating as we go down over time, right? And you see the same thing in the dating markets. There is just a massive twisting of the dating markets. People are having a great deal of trouble getting married, and to the point where we're not going to solve this by just saying, "Well, go out and trust the big systems." Do you understand that somebody that actually gets married, it makes less than 10% of what somebody who doesn't get married for the dating apps? So the dating apps are economically, if they like eHarmony for many years, lost money. I understand that they've sold and they're now under private equity management, and so I have no idea if they're doing this anymore. I kind of doubt it. But for many years, eHarmony lost money helping people get married, because in fact, you lose more money. You don't make nearly as much money helping people get married as you do helping them, arrange kind of a series of hapless, sexual encounters and failed relationships, right? If you're the thing that people keep coming back to when they get hopeful and when they want to start a relationship, you make a lot more money than you do by actually helping people connect with those that they're inclined to meet. So who is going to step in, right? What is the system that's going to happen? Well, it's going to be the system that always was. It's going to be the family. Mikkel has scheduled an entire, basically 2 sessions on one session on rites of passage and one session on preparing the next generation for marriage and mate selection, right? The other piece is that, if you're going to do a generational project, who your kids marry matters. Like, it matters a lot. And so if you think you're going to, you're going to send them out, they may not get married at all. They may not ever have children, right? Unless something very unusual, unless additional weight is put behind them to back them. And if they do get married, who they marry, if you don't have input in that, the odds of that being somebody who can work well within your environment, who can be a net benefit, who shares the calling and interest that you have, the things that you consider important, shares your values. I mean, the idea that that's just going to happen by random chance seems ludicrous to me. I don't understand it, right? And so as in so many things, this is sort of the entrepreneurial thing, right? It's if it's going to happen, it's going to happen because you made it happen. So,
Yeah. lots of threads there that I can pull on. And I think a lot of times going back to family formation, really, well, I feel like I weary people talking about it. I think it is one of the most objective measures of human flourishing that can be met. Right. I need to check the actual data on this, but so this is just metaphorical. I need to go and try to figure out what it is. But if you looked at a species, like if you just looked at a species and you said every generation of this species is getting smaller and smaller, and most of the pathways that traditionally have been available to allow this species to reproduce itself are getting worse and worse, then that species is by definition endangered. And you say, look, here's a little monarch lizard over here on the left side of the island, but he has to go all the way across to the other side of the island to find a mate. Well, normally, right, it should be the case that monarch lizard, when he's ready to mate, he can turn around and there's dozens of close by potential mates, and he doesn't have to travel on this epic journey across to the other side of the island. And if you looked and saw that, again, every generation is getting smaller, then you would say, that seems like a real problem. Well, if we applied the same thing we apply to humans as we do to animals, humans, and specifically some humans and some cultures, are endangered species. And the question that I always ask myself is my culture an endangered species? Is my people, the people who believe like I believe, who look like I look, who act like I act, who behave like I behave, are we an endangered species or not? And for the culture at large, generally we are, right? You see it going down, you see it. And the problem is, the reason I want to be an activist for this, I want to catalyze these conversations, is you reach a point in which it's too late. Just last week, my next door neighbor is a widow, and she has been receiving cancer treatment in another town. And she just returned home last week, and I saw her out watering her flowers, and I greeted her, and we wound up standing in her front yard talking for an hour. She's in her probably mid-70s. And her husband was a judge and had a stroke, and she cared for him for many years. They had two children, and we were just talking about things. And one of the things that was I did not bring up the subject, right? It was not me, but she just kind of was talking about the children and the fact that she has no grandchildren, right? Both of her children are successful people. One of them wants children, the other doesn't want children. The one that wants children has not been able to conceive them. But she was just talking about it, and she said, I never, ever imagined myself as an old lady and not having grandchildren. I thought it would just happen. And I was so moved with compassion for her. Here she is living all alone in a big, beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood, having just recovered she's cancer-free now after many months of treatment, just this fresh appreciation of life after going through this medical crisis. And yet, what can she do to change that? And I gave her some encouraging words, but I just thought, this is the situation that millions and millions of people are going to wind up in. They're not thinking long term. They're not envisioning things, and therefore they're going to wind up with these things when it's too late to do that. And I don't want...
They haven't updated their priors.
Right.
They haven't sat down. Like, was there a culture and a place that took care of them, that got their parents' grandchildren? Yes, there was. Where are those institutions today? Where are they?
Right.
Who runs them? Who funds them? As far as I can tell, they're just getting the short end of the stick at every, and many of them have ceased to exist altogether.
Yeah. And it's genuine, like people are facing genuine problems that they can't solve themselves. And that's what I try to beg older people to say. You have to go out and listen to the young people. And I think what you and I are doing is hopefully doing it well. We're trying to serve as a bridge between elderly people who have capital and who built that capital through hard work, through thrift and stewardship, and with the blessings of a society that made it possible for them to begin that capital accumulation process. And we're looking at younger generations who are being displaced, who are being disinherited, and who are not able to move forward, with some of us who have very high capacity as an exception. And what I believe we might do, if we can do this effectively, is we might stave off a political revolution. And if I look at... I was looking at the recent news articles about the recent success of the Democratic Socialists of America, and you see them winning in elections. And I hear older people talking about this. It's like, well, where is this coming from? How could this happen? It's like, are you dumb? Do you not listen? Like, what do you mean? How could this happen? Somebody throws you a bone and no one else will. Well, you're going to grab onto that bone and try to make a pathway forward. This has been the foundation. So I want to be one who is faithful in building this, and I want to help people to build it so that our legacies can continue. Go ahead.
Well, and I mean, I think it's not just throwing a kid who's a normal American kid a bone. It's throwing somebody who has a terrible relationship with their parents, who has not been successful, who has gotten ruinous amounts of student debt, which they were told to do by their parents and every single authority figure in their life, right? Many of whom went into, the safest jobs. They picked as much as it was possible for them to pick to avoid risk and do the right thing. And in a wait in line, they did it, and it didn't work out. And they have received enormous pushback. Again, many of these people come from deeply dysfunctional families. Many of these people come from families where pointing out, hey, dad, mom, the thing that you told me to do isn't working, is met with just immediate and overwhelming negative response, just because those are toxic people, right? And I mean, I am stereotyping, but we're talking about communists here, right? Like, when you look at, I've had hundreds of conversations with these people, and every time you go to, what's your relationship with your parents? Do you want to get married and have children? They hate their parents, and at this point, they don't believe they ever could have children. But even if they could, they wouldn't want them, because they view not having children as a way of getting vengeance upon their parents and grandparents, who they despise so much, right? And that is, what is happening in America broadly, and I think it's a tragedy, and it doesn't. I mean, I suppose every challenges come to every nation, But this challenge doesn't have to be as bad as it's turning out, right? There is a huge amount of unforced errors, and I think there's some reason for hope, right? So there was a recent, we talk about fertility statistics, and I went to the last natal con, and just met a bunch of people there, and there's been a bunch of attention brought by people like Elon Musk, and so now there's it's really interesting. There's some more money and some more attention. More academics are asking more detailed questions about natalism. And what we're finding is that conservative people, liberty-loving people, freedom-oriented people have, on average in America, 2.5 total fertility rate, right? Which is amazing. And what it means is that the left, the liberals, have on average like a 0.73 or something fertility rate. So way under replacement rate, right? And that's what gets us that average rate of 1.7 or 1.5 or whatever it is, right? So there's reasons to believe that our particular community, our particular culture, and maybe it's a subculture of America, is actually doing very well statistically. But I think so. I want to inject a little bit of hope in that, but also to say that doesn't mean that your particular bloodline is guaranteed any chance, is guaranteed to win. There is going to be a lot of families that don't make it because they didn't plan and they weren't prepared, right? We are facing. I think it's hard. I think a lot of your audience, a lot of my audience, are kind of prepper inclined or prepper adjacent, even if they're not outright preppers. And so understanding, hey, the apocalypse, the ending, the rending is looking different than we expected it to, right? There isn't massive government breakdowns. It's kind of more of like a slow, steady decline, right? But what that's going to mean is you have to, with every generation, you have to take on more. Your family has to embody more. Your family has to get bigger. As the government's capacity shrinks, which is, as its ability to actually do stuff in the real world shrinks, which our government's capacity is shrinking all the time, even as it's desperately trying to pull in money. We have to take on more. If we want good outcomes for our children, if we want, good streets and good neighborhoods and safe places, we more and more have to provide that at our cost with our investment. And we have to own it, right? We can no longer trust the government to own the public parks and the public streets and all of those things and just expect that to be well taken care of. I mean, there is an ideological problem. I don't want to minimize the ideological problem, but always remember there's like a basic competence problem. There is so many people that work for the government that simply cannot accomplish a task as defined, that they can't keep the roads maintained. They can't keep, the Amtrak tracks working. They can't make the trains run on time. They lack that capability, right? And so what does that mean? It means if you want to just sit back and say, oh, well, this is terrible, and you can watch, fiddle while America burns. I mean, okay, that's a thing you could do. But if you care about your children, if you love your children, if you want your children to have better outcomes than the average, well, then build something, right? One of the things to remind, the boomers is they have the largest cohort of wealth ever in human history, right? The 150 million or so boomers in America are the richest group of humans by like a factor of 4 or 5 compared to all other private citizens throughout the world in all of recorded history, right? You got to exclude, kings and monarchs who, people that could go around and seize stuff by combat, right? That throws off the
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 old ways.
calculations. But in terms of people that actually built wealth, the boomers have more of it than any group in human history. And what that means is they can create local conditions that are the way they want them to be. They still can, right? Until they kind of go offline, right? And more and more of them are entering homes, and I have serious questions about what's happening and how their money is being managed as these people, kind of enter more and more senescence. But for those that are active, that are bright, that which again, a lot of our community, a lot of the liberty-loving community are precisely those people. They're getting better than average health outcomes. They've gotten better than average financial outcomes. They can create the world that they want to see. They don't have to wait. It's true and tragic that the broad spectrum is the way it is, that kind of America, that the American public, the body politic is riddled with disease. But but a very small number of families can have a massive impact in their town, in their area, in their locality. And that's particularly true. One of the things Mikkel does is he does his primary company is Expat Money, and they help people move around. I mean, that's massively true. The impact of a relatively small number of American families on a town or a community outside of the US is profound. And so I think, I want to emphasize that agency still exists for that group of people. I don't know, honestly, that it exists in the same way for millennials on down. That's not clear to me. Maybe it will. Maybe as the boomers fall off, then that money will reappear. Maybe it will kind of slide around the government's, all the catching mechanisms that the U.S. government has to extract money from people that are dying. But it's entirely possible that it won't. It's entirely possible that the millennials will never receive their inheritance, and that money will just basically slide into, the government coffers and kind of institutional coffers. But right now, 10 boomers or even one family that builds a solid relationship from generation to generation can have an enormous impact. And I think that's one of the advantages, the benefits of this type of event, right? Because you're getting to go be in person, do the mastermind thing with families that are like facing the same challenges, that are similarly situated to you, and that you can experience that through them, learn from each other, talk to someone who's a couple years down the road and still remembers what it was like to be you, right? One of the challenges that I always have is, I grew up in this stuff. I grew up, my grandfather, it mattered to him that we were a fourth generation family. Like, he thought about that. And so I was raised kind of always with that. And there's a lot of benefits to that. I'm not complaining. But it means that I don't, I don't have the same experience that most Americans do. Well, at a mastermind like this, you've got people from, number one, from all walks of life, but you've got people that have the right, they are starting where you started and they're going to where you want to go. And that's just an incredibly valuable thing. And again, to sit and talk about how do you get there? What does it feel like to make these decisions and to make these pushes? Because you're setting a new type of culture. I think one of the most important things that you're doing, actually, and this is not really a money question, though there's, resources are always good and helpful. It's a culture setting question. Are we people that are defined by what everyone else does? And again, in the Liberty community, we're not those people, right? We are the people who said, well, we wouldn't jump off a bridge if everyone else said they're jumping off a bridge, which is what's happening, right? Societally, we are jumping off of a, antinatal bridge at scale. And I don't know where that goes. But I think those are kind of important points of hope that I want to inject. And one part of what will be an enormous blessing for the people that show up at this event.
Yeah. Being around people who care about the things that you care about is a tremendous way of resetting your belief in what is possible. Much of the time in life, we really only work on and work on the things that we believe is possible. And when we get around somebody who has a radically different experience than we have, and we can meet face to face, the guards go down, the barriers go down, and we can actually just listen and talk to them, it can say, all right, if that guy can do it, I can do it. And this can be done in health. I was just watching a video this morning of a 80-year-old lady who finished a full Ironman triathlon, right? If you say, hey, here's an 80-year-old lady who finished a full Ironman triathlon, then I can finish a full Ironman triathlon if I'm less than 80 years old, and I start off earlier than her. In terms of culture, right, I find this a great benefit of my own background, right? My parents had 7 children. All 7 of their children have a good testimony with the world, all righteous men and women, all of them walking with God, all intact marriages, all who are married have children. And I don't know many families like that, but you wind up with a lot of people, and they wind up knowing, oh, well, we had 4 children, but we lost 3 of them to various vices and sin, and kept one. Well, it's possible, right? It is possible. And so if you find somebody who has that, if you find a family where everyone is strong and athletic, when you find a family who everyone is highly educated, when you find a family where everyone is well employed and works together and likes one another, these are skills. These are not things that can't be done, right? These are skills.
Right.
Human beings are highly predictable. And one of the things that has happened is it seems like many people have basically just thrown up their hand and said, oh, it's magic. We can't figure out why this works. Well, you got to build reciprocity, right? You got to build a sense of engagement. You got to build a sense of fun. You got to build a family culture where people want to work together. And it's not easy. My children fight with each other out doing the dishes. And we keep on working at it every single day of doing the dishes, because I know that when we can finally work together effectively to wash the dishes, my dishwasher's been broken for a few months and they keep asking me why I haven't replaced it. I'm like, I don't have that many training opportunities right now. Right now, my children learning how to wash the dishes as a team and figure out how to help them to team up rather than to fight with each other. This is what I'm going to need 20 or 30 years from now when they're sitting around a boardroom table. I need them to be part of a family team. And so we can build culture. We can do it intentionally. We can build resources. We can build business, and we can do it in a healthy way. We don't have to react and be just the anti-people. Oh, well, I knew a father that imposed one time too high of an expectation on his child, and he said, you will take over my medical practice. So therefore, I'm not going to encourage my child to go to medical school because I knew this guy one time who had this childhood dream of being a doctor. Or you see this with sports figures, right? He failed out of football in college, and he required his child to go to the NFL. Well, we can know people who do that, but the norm is that children will want to follow parents. The norm is that parents and children have relationships like that. But as you said, even with, go ahead.
And whenever you hear those stories, ask some basic questions. Was the guy in a healthy, happy marriage? Was he successful in life and business? Or was he, was he a faithful member of some church or community organization? Or was he just a miserable wreck of a person who ruined every relationship that he ever had, right?
Right.
Like, there are skill issues to this stuff, right? And there are levels to the skills. If you see someone, just because you see someone run a car into a crowd of people, that doesn't mean that, like, driving cars is bad, right? Like, those are not equivalent statements.
Right. So I want to just lay a positive vision for basically the concept of legacy building, right? What's the title of this seminar that you guys are hosting? Again, it was
it's the
Family Legacy Mastermind.
Yeah, Family Legacy Mastermind.
Craft a private retreat where you craft your 100-year master plan, right? So you and Mikkel are hosting this, and I love Mikkel. Mikkel and I are going to work together for a very long time to come, because Mikkel is he's so tuned into this, and I'm going to be careful. I don't want to betray his intellectual property, but he made a statement in his presentation that he did for me at family camp, where he just talked about, he's like, I don't own anything, right? I don't have any money, right? We have a family trust, a family foundation that owns everything, right? And the family council owns everything. And my job is to grow the assets for the family. That's my job. And along the way, of course, my expenses are taken care of, but my job is to do that. And I just thought, like, that's what I want. That's what I want. I don't have it formally established yet, but that's what I want. I want to devote the next 60 years of my life towards building the family. And I see that as so incredibly powerful as this basic foundation of stewardship. I spent years being a Christian, being involved in financial planning. I spent years reading all the financial curricula out there, right? And one of the most well-known that was very good was what Larry Burkett did and what Crown Financial did and still does. And they start off by talking about stewardship. It's always the foundational lesson when you're going to teach, like, Christian biblical finances: stewardship. Right. I always believed in stewardship. Okay. The problem is that I've observed, it's like, what do you do with that? Let's say you're fully convinced of the fact that I'm a steward, right? What do you actually do with that? And let's be careful. I've been really frustrated that basically I know a lot of seemingly faithful Christians whose concept of stewardship in reality works out basically the way as all the non-Christians does, which basically means I'm going to earn a bunch of money, I'm going to spend a bunch of money, I'm going to disinherit my children, and maybe the stewardship means that I always give a faithful tithe to my local church. Well, how is that stewardship? right? How is that
Right.
actually applied stewardship? But when Mikkel said that at family camp, I just thought, that's what I want, right? I want to actually be a steward of the family assets. And as a steward of the family assets, I don't want to own anything. And I want my children to recognize that I am training you to be a steward of the family assets. And then the family is the central.
Just like I am.
Right, exactly. I've set the example for you. And it has that idea in actuality resolves so many things. And I want to say this, right? So I kind of have recognized that basically what I do is I speed run things. And so over the last 10 years, I have, in many degrees, I have speed ran. I speed ran. I'm not sure. I went through a lot of the philosophies regarding money and finance and goals and ambition that I previously found really attractive, right? I built an online business and said, okay, how can I click print and send to my list and make a lot of money? Well, I've done that and it's cool, right? But it's lacking. And I thought, well, let me do the nomad thing. And I've done it and it's cool, but it's lacking. And I've done the early retirement thing to a degree. I've never been fully financially independent where I can just sit back and not work, but I've lived a lifestyle in many ways as though I were. And I've done that and I've found it lacking. The only things that I have not ever found lacking have been basically things related to service, solving problems, and relationships. Is that I feel so much enthusiasm over watching my children win. And this is where I think every parent has had this. I want my children to go farther than I am. You cannot see a parent who doesn't, just a normal person who doesn't want their children to go farther than they are, and who doesn't derive much more joy out of seeing their children with an Olympic medal rather than them with an Olympic medal around their thing. It is the consistent thing across all cultures and across all time is that seeing your people flourish and succeed is powerful. And then having a long-time goal, having a long-term perspective is also the thing that is powerful. I cannot, my goal years ago when I got into the fire stuff was to be financially independent at 40. Right? I didn't hit it. And I'm glad I didn't, because I cannot imagine how miserable I would be wandering around the world, filling up my passport by myself, just as some kind of like passport bro without the other things. I'm glad that I figured it out pretty quickly. What I am excited about is the coming decades of doing that with my children, but doing it on a building basis. And I'm also, and then having a long-term plan, right? You look at older people and you do what I do for a living, what we do for a living, what people do. If you counsel older people, you find that as soon as they lose a sense of vision for the future, a sense of meaning, as soon as their future is smaller than their past, they just get old and shrivel up and die. And if you don't want to do that, you have to have a vision that outlives you. Well, how are you going to do that? The only way you can do that is if you have a vision that flows down through generations and through into eternity. That's it. And it was so fascinating. I watched last night, I was doing some busy work and I was listening to an interview with real estate mogul Ben Malla on the Iced Coffee Hour podcast. And Grant was talking to Ben about his real estate thing. So Ben, I don't know, ostensibly has a $500 million real estate portfolio, something like that. Great guy, big, gregarious New Yorker, never went to college, has lots of money, has a yacht, selling his $30 million house. And he's just a genuine guy, right? And what was interesting is Grant in the podcast kept coming back to Ben's excitement is doing consulting. And Ben's selling consulting slots for pennies, right? $350 for like 15 minutes, something like that, like $1,000 something an hour. Where else are you going to talk to a guy who has hundreds of millions of dollars for less than $1,000 an hour, right? That doesn't exist in the world, right? And so I immediately just started making a list of questions. Like I didn't know Ben was doing this, but he kept coming back to it, and it was really organic and really clear. It's like Ben is exciting about it. He's laying out his thing. It's like he says, I never went to high school, but I made all this money. I got started in real estate. And he's like, the only thing I care about is basically just helping people. And here is this guy, big fat guy, total glutton, total like hedonist, that's just who he is, right? And yet he's like, the thing I care about is not going around on my yacht with my hot wife. The thing I care about is helping random people on the internet, helping random young people actually build it. So at the end of it all, I just want to say, like, legacy planning from an early age is the thing that's going to take you the farthest, and it's going to be the thing that's going to be the most fun because you're not alone. And that's the other error that I have made, that I learned, is you don't want to be alone. It's always easier to go faster when you're alone, but you don't want to go alone. And so where else and how else can I build a plan that is 100 or more years long, where I can do fun things that I'm well suited for with people who I like, and I can do it in a way that's going to grow, and we can have a lot of fun together, other than in working hard on developing some component of family legacy. And that doesn't specify the implementation. For me, it may mean that 2 of my children work in my business and 4 of my children don't. It may mean that you have various structures. Like, it doesn't, saying I'm going to pursue legacy doesn't put the specific plan in place, because you have to look at who are the players and how do we actually work with this. But pursuing it is absolutely the best long-term outcome that any of us can achieve.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the things that people realize when they come to the end of their life and they meet their maker is how many promises, how many relationships, how many things that they built that they wish could carry on. And why do they wish they could carry on? Because they're good things. Because they're good. It's good for the world that this opera house or this business or this community thing continue to exist. It's good for the world that there be a family who stands upon a watchtower and says, this is true and right and good and beautiful, and I'm going to be here to defend it. There's so many relationships that you have where, knowingly or not, especially with people, kind of outside of the modern Western sphere, that they really expect, because humans expect this, that you're going to raise up an heir, that your promises are not just for you and for your lifetime, but that they continue from generation to generation. And really, wouldn't you want them to? Right? Wouldn't you want the good things that you have done in your life to have a dedicated, godly, virtuous means of carrying forward into the future? That's all that a family legacy is. It's saying, hey, there are these good things that we don't want to end because of somebody, passing away. And here is a virtuous, reasonable plan for making those things carry forward into the future. So let's do it. So I think, who doesn't want to do that when you think about it that way? And yes, there are challenges, and yes, there are hard things, but most of those challenges, as we've said repeatedly, basically are the challenges that come from doing nothing, right? If you do nothing, this isn't going to go your way. But if you do something, if you sit down and you make a plan and you pursue it for even a couple years, but certainly for 5 or 10 years, man, very few people do that. None of the bad cases that you've heard about involved somebody doing that, right? Like, the outcomes that the people that plan and work at it get are so good and so uniformly good. I just think that's an important piece that I want to hit as we end. So thank you so much, Joshua.
Absolutely. So in closing, November 2 through November 8, November 2 through November 8. Tell us about the conference that you're doing.
Yeah, so there's actually 2 pieces to it, and you don't have to come to both. So there's the first workshop, which is November 2nd through November 4th, and that's basically for people that didn't come last year. And then there is workshop 2, which is November 6th through November 8th. There's kind of a break day in between there. And those that's carrying on with some of the work that we did from last year, and the people that come to both sessions will be able to enjoy it. And Mikkel has kind of a special track for people that might only be able to come to the second session. But I'll get the people that reach out to me. I'll put in contact with him, and we'll make sure that happens. But yeah, it's a really cool opportunity. It's in a gorgeous part of St. Kitts, and in the Caribbean, and it's just a lovely experience all the way around.
It's going to be good if they're going to get you on an airplane.
I hate fun.
Yes, you do. Well, I just want to encourage. So, what's the website, Greg, for people to sign up?
So For purposes of this, go to avalоncircle.com/mastermind, and that'll take you to my landing page, and then you can sign up, and then I'll forward that on to Mikkel's team.
Yeah.
So to get people on board.
Yeah, go to avalоncircle.com/mastermind. I'm not receiving any commission on this. I love Greg. I want to see him flourish. I love Mikkel. I want to see him flourish. And anybody for whom this topic resonates with you, you will be extremely well served by doing this. Greg and I, we wanted to organize an event in this fall for just the two of us, and we weren't able to pull it off, largely due to my own challenges. So this is the best first opportunity to discuss these things. So if this is interesting to you, if you're interested in legacy planning, Greg and Mikkel and I in the coming years, we're going to do a lot, and you're going to get so much out of it. So go to avalоncircle.com/mastermind, avalоncircle.com/mastermind, and sign up there. Greg, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.
They're part of the family, but let's be honest, they're also pretty tough on your floors. From muddy paws after a walk, to spilled water bowls, to claws shedding, and the occasional accident, your floors see it all. That's why S&G Carpet & More has flooring that's built for the whole pack. Choose from waterproof luxury vinyl plank, laminate, hardwood, and durable carpet designed to stand up to busy families and the pets you love. They're beautiful, easy to clean, and made for everyday life. Even better, during our Built for the Whole Pack event, save 25% on select flooring all August long. S&G helps families find the perfect floor with expert guidance, professional installation, and free in-home consultations where we bring the samples directly to you. Visit one of our many showrooms, schedule your free in-home consultation at sgcarpet.com, or call 1 Ton of Carpet today. Built for the Whole Pack ends August 31st.
S&G, more than carpet, where quality is affordable.